All right, now that we have our entire portfolio joining us, this is going to be the best and most exciting panel that you get the privilege of attending and seeing online at COP. And so today we're talking big funds, big tech, and the carbon management revolution. This is exciting and fun times, and everyone up here with me today is an expert and knows this better than I do. So I'm excited to be the moderator of this brilliant panel today. We have on this side of me Claude Letourneau. He is the CEO of Svante. Then we have next to him Kel Coulson. She is one of my new dear friends. Kel is with Carbon Engineering. We have Rob Niven, who is a last-minute addition to our panel, and we're so thankful for him to be here. He is with Carbon Cure, and a long-term friend, Julio Friedman, the Carbon Wrangler, straight from Carbon Direct. So thank you all for being here today, and I'm excited to get started. So the write-up on the website tells you all about how financing and getting things up to speed and trying to get people interested and involved in investing is all something we have a challenge with. You know, but there are a lot of people out there with some big money that want to buy in to CCS. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. But before we do, I'm going to pass the mic down the line so that everyone can just say a little bit to profile themselves and let you know who they are and why they matter for what we're talking about today.
Thank you. Claude from Svante. So we are Vancouver-based. We are a pure play in carbon capture and removal. So we've developed a unique technology called a solid sorbent. So instead of using gas to liquid technology conventionally in the industry, we're the second generation technology that's hopefully is going to capture quite a bit of a market share. And that solid sorbent allows us to catch and release the CO2 very quickly in less than 60 seconds. So we've developed our own sorbent material, our own process to make the filters. And then we have a contactor that is a moving bed that catches and releases and regenerates the filter every 60 seconds. So 6 years ago when I joined the company, we were about 25. We're now close to 300 people. We've raised about $500 million US. And we're on the merge of having a first manufacturing line to make the filters built in Vancouver. So that's a manufacturing facility that we're spending $125 million US to build without a purchase order. So we need to have the faith that this market will explode. Capacity of that filtering capacity of that plant will be about 10 million ton a year of filtering capacity. So remember, the world today has 40 plants of 1 million ton. We're building a factory to make the filters to feed every year 10 plants a year. But the goal is that we see the market that needs to go to a level of 10,000 plants in 30 years. So 10,000 plants, that means every 2 weeks from now on, we need to commission 100 plants or 2 plants a week for 100 plants a year. So that's basically the task we're on. We see big, and we're working with all of the various partners in the industry to go to market. So 3 things in our mind every single day. Carbon capture and removal needs to be a necessity. Hopefully after this COP28, it will become a necessity. We need to scale this business to the scale of 10,000 plants a year. And we need to work at doing it fast. And the way we use it internally is ludicrous speed. So that's what we do. We're more nimble than the big companies in trying to do these things. So we'll see where it goes.
All right.
Thanks. Good morning. Thanks for that. So we have a very BC-focused panel. Kel Coulson from Carbon Engineering. I'm the Director of Policy. And for those that are not familiar with Carbon Engineering, we're a Canadian-based clean technology company based in Squamish, BC, which is an hour north of Vancouver. We still think of ourselves as a startup, but we were founded in 2009 by Professor David Keith with the North Star of being able to develop direct air capture technology at climate-relevant scale. So our core expertise at Carbon Engineering is developing the technology to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Once that CO2 has been removed, we can find partners that will help store it geologically safely underground, or partners that can combine our CO2 with green hydrogen to develop low carbon, drop-in compatible fuels like sustainable aviation fuel. And so our journey has been 14 years to commercialization. And let me just kind of take you through that 14-year journey. So we started out at the University of Calgary as a research and development. We moved to Vancouver West Coast in 2015 to do our first pilot plant. That pilot plant was proof of concept and helped inform our innovation center. We commissioned our innovation center in 2021. Our innovation center is our home base for all of our research and development that we have planned to be able to get the cost down on our technology. From that, all of the data and great campaigns that we ran on the Innovation Center, it helped provide the context that we needed to develop the design for our first commercial plant. Our first commercial plant is being deployed by our plant development partner, 1.5. Construction on that started in 2022, will complete in 2025, and when complete, it will be the largest direct air capture facility in the world at half megaton per year. And just for concept on the scale of our plants, it's about 100 acres, it's about $1 billion, and it's a 30-year lifespan. And that is really important because right now, the demand is driven by climate policy, and the offtake is the revenue is carbon markets. So we really need to be able to figure out the other part of that equation. We've got the commercial part down, and now we need the demand and compliance markets to come online. Lastly, recently, we're very excited that we have been acquired by our plant technology partner. And so 1.5 has purchased Carbon Engineering's technology. That makes us the first climate tech unicorn, which we're very excited about. And what that does for us is we have line of sight on 2 pathways to be able to capture carbon dioxide cheaper. One is our evolutionary pathway, where we're knitting together this technology in a more effective manner, a more efficient manner. So we have line of sight on that. And we also have line of sight of revolutionary technology, which is how do we make our technology leaps and bounds better, different materials, different processes. And so with the investment from 1.5, we're able to do both of those things. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Kel. Pleasure to be here, third speaker from British Columbia. And I know Julio's been to British Columbia, so we can speak to that.
I can spell BC.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So my name is Rob Niven. My mom calls me Robert, nobody else. And apparently, yes, Beth as well. So we are a Canadian carbon removal business, and it's actually the order here works out really well. What we do is we mineralize CO2 in concrete. So it can be captured at a point source, such as Svante, or from the air, such as Carbon Engineering. We just had a big announcement with another direct air capture company called Heirloom, where we use their CO2, and I'm going to have to get you to update your points there. It can also be used for concrete. So not just chemicals, but there's a lot more CO2 being used in concrete than those other applications. So we retrofit concrete plants. We have a radically low-cost model. It takes us about a day to retrofit any of the 125,000 concrete plants in the world, so that the next day they are mineralizing CO2 and then creating value from that. What I mean by creating value is that through this reaction of mineralizing CO2 in concrete, it actually increases its strength. Once you increase the strength of concrete, it allows you to lower its cost by using less cement. And then the other secondary knock-on benefit is once you lower the cement, that also means you're lowering the CO2 again. And then all this concrete meets all of the same requirements and standards that you would require to build things. So we're at a point today where this model has been applied in over 800 plants in 35 countries, including here in the Emirates. Most recently, Dubai was our latest plant to be added. We're expecting a lot of growth within the region, but there's 125,000 plants worldwide. So we still have a lot of growth in front of us, and we're innovating new technologies that are mineralizing CO2 using some of the same science at the same concrete plants that allow us to store more and more CO2, including as the winner of the Carbon X Prize, we developed a wholly new technology which has benefits in water reuse as well. And in areas like this, it's particularly important. So not only are you mineralizing CO2, but you're also reducing the water intensity of making concrete, the world's most abundant man-made material, second to drinking water. So we can have a really big impact with this. I'm going to hand it over now to my very good friend,
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Also glad to be holding up the non-Canadian corner of the stage. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julio Friedman. Once upon a time, I was a technology innovator, not an entrepreneur like these people, but made and built things. Also, once upon a time, I ran the Office of Fossil Energy. I no longer do either of these things, but if you look at the title here, Big Funds, Big Tech, and Carbon Management Revolution, my company, Carbon Direct, deals directly with the big funds and the big tech. And happy to talk more about these in depth. We are actually two companies. One of those is an investment fund. That fund has raised, we're in our second fund at this point. We've invested in about 10 or 15 companies, including two of them on the stage, Carbon Cure and Svante. And we're also partnered with Carbon Engineering on other projects. So we like these roles. We like helping people succeed. The other company is where I work. That is an advisory firm. Our customers are about 60 or 70 multinational corporations. You may have heard of one or two of them. Microsoft is one of our customers. Have you heard it? Raise your hand. Anybody heard Mike? Yes. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, GlaxoSmithKline, Apple, manufacturers like Temasek, logistics companies, you name it. We governments around the world, and in all cases, we bring our calling card, which is deep science. The company's about 115 people now. Half of that is our science team, and everything from forestry experts to chemical and mechanical engineers, experts in mineralization and direct air capture and biomass supply and biochar. We basically try to midwife the connections between people who actually deliver abatement, like the people who are next to me on stage, and the people who are buying abatement. We are not an exchange. We don't buy and sell credits. Nope. Not our business model. Don't like it very much. But we do want buyers, like the companies I mentioned earlier, to buy from these guys, to buy from sellers. And so we're basically bootstrapping a market that barely exists. And I can talk more about that in depth. The last thing I'll say before handing the mic all the way back to Beth is that we do not have a pavilion here or representation in Dubai, but I think everybody else on stage does. So I'll head back in this direction.
Right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the great introduction. I think everybody is getting a good idea and the good feel of what this panel is about, the excitement around the carbon management revolution. So, my next question is, why should anyone care? Not, obviously, these reductions are important for climate change, et cetera. We all know that. What I want to know is, why does Microsoft want to invest in your corporation? Why does, McDonald's, I think, maybe you can give me a little update. Let's start there. The last time you and I really had a good chat, Robert, was McDonald's was getting interested in this. You've come a long way since then. Can you let us know why someone like McDonald's and the rest of the companies since then want to invest and be part of what you're doing?
Thanks very much. So that was actually a number of years ago. So when in Chicago, when McDonald's built their flagship store of the future, they wanted to have the most sustainable construction practices, and they chose Carbon Cure, and that was probably one of our first big case studies. And then since then, tech, actually, the theme of the topic has really moved in quite significantly, and are really driving decarbonization in the built environment. And it just so happens to be using our technology, which is a carbon removal, carbon mineralization solution. So we, for instance, do a lot of tech's construction. So whether that be HQ2, is every yard there is made with Carbon Cure, or a lot of their data centers, even their airports, and distribution centers. So we work with them on that level, on the product level, but we also work with tech on the removals and the reduction credit side as well. So they have gold standard climate targets, and they require these kinds of credits at a very high volume and a very limited supply to be able to meet those targets. And they're really, really important at doing that.
We're going to have a fight up here. Everyone wants to answer my good question.
Well, in our case at Svante, we sit on both sides of carbon management. So we sit on the point source, and we sit also on the what we call carbon removal. Our filters can be adapted also for direct air capture, and it also does the point source, obviously. So the market, the voluntary market, is on the CDR, not on the compliance. So our point source market is compliance, but on the CDR, we offer a solution by basically capturing from a point source the biogenic CO2 coming out of pulp and paper. And that creates basically a price point or a cost of capturing it at CDR level on the pulp and paper in the range of $100 per ton, as opposed to higher number you would see for diluted stream like air, which would be in excess of that number. So I think we will offer, interestingly, a voluntary market option at lower costs in the market, obviously with less volume capacity, but earlier may be interested for developing the market.
Don't give him that monkey. I'm the moderator. I'm coming to you last for a reason. And actually, I want to go to Kel next. All Nippon Airways. Let's talk that, okay? I want to go back to the big investment. Why people are investing in these products. All Nippon Airways, huge deal. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So we signed ANA in the summer, and ANA was a unique airline. They're based in Japan, and if anybody wants to take a look at their net zero strategy, it is very unique for aviation. They recognized really early on a couple of different things. One, that net zero means removals, and the other one is that they wanted high quality offsets because of some of the challenges with the voluntary carbon market and all of the things that we're all familiar with. So they wanted to lean into technology. The other reason they wanted to lean into technology was the other reason they wanted to lean into direct air capture technology is that direct air capture can eventually be a feedstock for SAF. So those were the reasons that they decided that they were going to lean in. We have been, so the deal with ANA, they would like to use direct air capture credits for their CORSIA compliance. So it's obviously one of the more expensive options for that, but they recognize that this is where the future is, and if you want to be able to have the megatons needed for aviation to decarbonize, you need to lean in now.
So the revolution here is being driven by a mixture of opportunity and requirement. And that's jurisdictional in Europe. There's a certain amount of regulation, compliance requirements, but that's also becoming an issue in something like aviation. The CORSIA standards that the ICAO is putting out, the new standards that the International Maritime Organization are putting together, these are driving a requirement for deep reductions and removals. At the same time, the opportunity space here is those companies that are doing the most in climate, the ones who have made the most ambitious commitments, are the ones who are actually spending the most money, and all of them are now engaged in real carbon management. Whether that is an opportunity to try to decarbonize their supply chains in things like steel or cement or chemicals, or whether that is to simply say, hey, we have an irreducible fraction of our emissions, we need to be proactive on that irreducible fraction. We're reducing everything we can, but we need to remove as well. Let's learn, and we're going to learn by doing. We're going to invest money in projects, and we're going to fly to quality. And right now we're beginning to see a bifurcation in the voluntary carbon market, a split between high risk and high quality. And basically, if you go to our website, you can look at the status of the voluntary carbon market report. We published it about a month ago. The high risk market, what you read about with a Guardian expose or something like that, that has dropped 17% in the last year. In contrast, the high-quality market has quintupled. And the reason why is because people know they want to do it, and the big funds and the tech and the companies that are most serious have a procurement officer, and that person says, how do I know it's done? And so they seek the very highest quality of carbon removal, whatever it is, and they seek verification for carbon reductions, however it's done.
Okay, so this is the perfect segue into what I want to talk about next. When we're talking big funds, big tech, and the carbon management revolution, what becomes really apparent is the need for carbon pricing, compliance, and voluntary markets, and how those things drive and accelerate the deployment. So there's an investment piece into getting these projects to exist. I think we've covered that pretty well, why people are investing, wanting these products, wanting them to happen, but it ties into that back end piece. And I really want each of our panelists to take a thoughtful approach here, an exciting thoughtful approach to why, and to explore a little bit more about what Dr. Friedman just spoke about, the voluntary piece and why this is important. Now, I do want to say that Alberta has a fantastic compliance market, which also talks about regulations and verification and things that bases a lot of the decisions on the voluntary market piece as well. And so I would be remiss if I don't acknowledge the value of compliance markets, but and how they can interact with voluntary. But I just thought I'd start there. And Kel, I want you to talk about other. I do want you to talk about other in the answer, but it's a little side joke thing, but it is important. So we need to go there.
I'm more the compliance side of the business, but I think like what we're going to be doing on the CDR side of it, we do offer a solution to direct air capture by providing the filter inside to Climeworks. So Climeworks has to deal with the issue of getting the voluntary market to basically finance such a big plant that they're building up, a million ton per year plant. So indirectly, we're tracking this thing with our partner. Well, okay, and then, but I think the one that I believe will be more closer to us is the pulp and paper, and then in Brazil, the ethanol plants where you can pick up the CO2 from the biomass being burned, and then collect that CO2 at much lower price. So I think we tend to look at every project from a capital stack and an operating a revenue stack. In the compliance market, I think in Canada we have an interesting model of a price on carbon, and then we have the ITC, and with the Alberta government also funding close to 62% of the capex, so that helps. On the revenue side, we have to play with the different mechanism of compliance that also allows this, but Canadian government will be supporting also with contract for difference that I believe will be quite instrumental in us being able to monetize the revenue side of it. Interesting times. On the U.S. side, I think it's much easier in the sense that 45Q covers both the capex and the capital stack and the the revenue stack. So it makes it less complicated to do, but I believe this is more of a model for de-risk the supply chain than a sustainable model to use in the future. So I think being both on the Canadian side and the U.S. side allows us to fully understand the different business model to generate the revenue stream that you need to pay for a waste material, which is CO2. So this is a waste. This is waste management. There's no value for the CO2 unless you do it in application like Rob is doing and the like. But at gigaton scale, 10 gigaton scale, this is where we're focusing on. We will need to have that business model cracked up.
So from a voluntary market perspective, voluntary market has lifted our first plans. Sorry, up. I'm normally quite loud, so I'm careful with the microphone. So the voluntary the voluntary carbon market is the big lift for our first plans, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's something that Julio said, where you have actors that are willing to lean in. They're sophisticated actors, so they're either actors that can assess the value of direct air capture or hire somebody like Julio to tell them that it's a great idea. But a lot of buyers are in the middle, and they're not necessarily first movers. So we see the voluntary market as something that's needed, and the standards developed there will hopefully help inform compliance markets that this is possible. But when you think about deploying, if you want to deploy 101 megaton plants, going hand in hand with each individual buyer is a rough go, and we won't scale. So for us, compliance markets are really that long-term piece. Corsia with ANA is a compliance market, and at some point you need to have the frameworks for everything like Article 6 and corresponding adjustments and the carbon accounting needed to ensure that you're going to move this carbon appropriately and account for it appropriately. And I just note that some of the great compliance markets that we have pointed to, California LCFS does a great job at recognizing that the atmosphere is a shared resource. It's geographically agnostic. The carbon removed in Texas can still be counted in the California LCFS. That's a good thing. The BC standard, also great. They've started to obligate aviation. If you look at the carbon abatement curve, DAC is expensive, but it's not expensive relative to what is a high cost to abate sector. So if you can nudge your compliance markets to deeply decarbonize the sectors that we haven't started to regulate, then we can get to decarbonization effectively, and then also get the accounting so that we're not necessarily having these voluntary carbon market purchases that, if you do it from a megaton perspective, we're not integrating them appropriately to be able to do the accounting.
Yeah. Great remarks. This has all been really interesting. Maybe I'll just take it maybe in a different angle. First anchoring on tech, it was companies like Canadian Shopify, Stripe, and Microsoft that really kicked off the removals market through that voluntary mechanism. And then there's many other buyers that are looking for non-removal credits. But I'll speak to from like an innovator, and I'm seeing more and more companies that have built-in carbon markets as part of their business model, and it's a critical point. But what I'd like to talk about is how these tech companies and their investments and these credits are actually driving the tech transfer, especially into emerging markets. And it's borderless. And that's the beautiful thing about voluntary carbon markets, is like it allows us to build that into our value proposition so that we can move into places. We're going to have an announcement this week about our first plants in sub-Saharan Africa. That would not be possible without voluntary carbon markets. And they don't care who's buying, and it's borderless, and you just pull up electrons and you treat them just the same as you would in a plant in Zurich or in New York City, and in many ways buyers actually would prefer to have that added impact to be able to operate and tech transfer into emerging markets. And that's one of the things that I really love about the VCM. There's many things that frustrate me, but that's one that I have found to be really important in this climate change discussion.
Go ahead. I would like Julio to actually come around on the back end.
Right. So a couple of quick hits. One of them is we love the voluntary carbon market. As Kel was saying, it actually allows us to get going and to scale and to bring money and to bring investors and to develop standards and to demonstrate the technology works. Hugely, hugely important. Remember, right now, today, the voluntary carbon market is $2 billion. That is not going to build a whole bunch of Kel's plants. Just not going to do it. Not big enough. So, in fact, the compliance market, by contrast, is about $600 billion. So that is a bigger sort of way to go. But the compliance market will learn from what we do in the voluntary carbon market. With respect to the borderless aspects, I couldn't agree with Rob more. A good friend of mine at African Climate Ventures, James Mwangi, said, carbon removal will not be done to the development world or for the developing world. It will be done by the developing world. And in point of fact, President Ruto of Kenya has said that he wants carbon credits to be the #1 export from Kenya, larger than coffee, larger than tea, which is saying something. It actually allows them to expand their grid. They need an industrial load. Direct air capture actually represents an industrial load. CO2 utilization feeds an industrial system. And so they are building now industrial hubs that will allow them to expand access to clean electricity to serve those, and also to bring more clean electricity to more people and to generate wealth. But it is in fact going to be started in and organized around the voluntary carbon market. That's how it will be born. I would encourage all of you, as I hand the microphone back to Beth, to remember that the world we are in now is not the world of 5 years from now. We're going to have a lot of change over the next couple of years in policy and technology and the way the markets behave and business models, all of these sorts of things. But this is how and where it starts, with these voluntary contributions.
Since I have the mic, I'll take it. So, okay, I'd like to bring the conversation to the social cost of carbon, because I believe costs, you need to have a reference point for the price to be established. The voluntary market right now is an offer and demand, yes, but the cost, the alternative of not capturing, sneakily find its way through a regulation with EPA the last week to basically bump up the social cost from $45 to $190 per ton. And this will make its way through legislation, but that's a reference that I believe people will be using to say, well, that's the cost of knowing nothing, and that $190 may be going up over time. But I think this is an important aspect that people are underlooking. But that hopefully they will help establish a better price for the voluntary.
So, in terms of that, I mean, obviously, big tech, we're covering how this is big tech, and we need a revolution in all of this to make these projects happen. But when we're talking big money, what is the value besides the social cost? You just gave us a 190, but let's go back to that a little bit. What is the dollar? Can I even ask you, how much do you get for these projects on the voluntary market? What is that at, right? Maybe I should give that to Julio, actually, to address, to let our audience know, what are the value of some of these removals at right now? And the compliance ones, I suppose, as well.
Or voluntary reductions.
To make sure I'm understanding what you're asking, when you are asking value, are you asking price?
Actually, good differentiation. Obviously, it's a broad value.
Right.
Go with price, and then you can take it.
I'll end with price, actually. So, as I just described in the case of Kenya, it's true for communities everywhere. If you start these projects, you actually create jobs, you create wealth. And there are many communities around the country and around the world that seek that kind of opportunity. It is, in fact, also a tax base. It is an industrial base, all of these other sorts of things. So it has that value. For things like point source capture, you actually reduce pollution loads locally as well. You reduce sulfur, you reduce NOx, you reduce volatile organic carbons, VOCs, you reduce soot and particulates. All of these things are reduced dramatically through the application of these kind of point source systems. And we measured that at plants where this has happened. That is simply true. In many cases, in part because the United States has driven some of this locally, there is in fact a program called Justice 40, which requires 40% of the government money to be spent in disadvantaged communities and requires those projects to have a clear and compelling community benefits plan. And often those include things like local monitoring for environmental quality, training of first responders, a whole other set of things that communities seek, and an opportunity for them to grow. So these benefits are actually real and material, and as a consequence, I'm pleased to see that there's sort of this race to the top. It's a virtuous cycle where more and more communities are asking to host these kinds of facilities. This is part of the reason why so many governments are spending so much money on this. They see it as an opportunity for trade, they see it as an opportunity for technology prowess, and they see it as an opportunity for growth, for jobs, for organized labor, all of these kinds of things. With respect to the price is all bloody over the map. That shouldn't surprise everybody. But part of the reason why is because these are really differentiated products. One of the conceits that I find most offensive to me is the idea that all carbon credits are all equal in all dimensions, and it's just like Brent crude. That's just nonsense. Imagine if you went to a commodities exchange and said, I want to buy platinum or I want to buy nickel. And they said, well, you can't buy either of those, but you can buy a box of metal. We got all the metal you want to buy. Here's a box. $50 a ton, you know. These are very, as a function of additionality, durability, verifiability, community benefits. All of these things are quite different. Durability or permanence. But in point of fact, we are starting to see these kinds of companies and funds really differentiate in their thinking. Something like a biochar credit, which is maybe a few hundred years of durability, that might be in the $100 to $150 a ton range. Something like point source capture could be anywhere from $50 to $100 a ton, depending on the technology and the point source and all of these kinds of things. For direct air capture, the range is again all over the place. The prices which you're seeing out there are between $400 and $1,000 a ton, but they vary quite a lot as a function of the local conditions, the labor, all of these sorts of things. It shouldn't surprise anybody. I also think that we are about to see those costs drop dramatically. As we are deploying, as we're coming down the learning curve, we are using only about 10% of the thermodynamic limit. We're leaving like 85% of the exergy on the table. And in point of fact, we have already seen the costs drop by 50% over the past decade. We're going to see them drop again another 50% by 2030 and again another 50% over the next decade.
Can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
just talk about compliance markets for one more second to talk about compliance markets. So the price point for BC LCFS in September was $350 US per ton. It's not subsidized by an RFS like the state, so it's really the true cost. So that's considerable for being able to close the business case for us once we come down our cost curve. I'll also mention the cross-border adjustments. Absolutely, it makes tons of sense to be able to do things quickly without needing those adjustments. But if you think about biofuels in BC, when I was in the fuels sector, we import biofuels from all over the world to be compliant. At some point, we were shipping tallow from BC to Singapore to be refined by Neste to come back to BC into the BC compliance system, which is bonkers. So at some point, yeah, let's be smart about being able to open the borders to be able to have the lowest cost of compliance happen for industries that need it, and be able to build plants where it makes sense, where you can have social and economic benefit costs for those that need it.
Only because I've known you so long.
I promise it'll be super short. And this is a part of prompt from Rob. This is a hot topic in the Article 6 discussions, unsurprisingly. And so how that gets sorted is in fact going to be business for the COP this week. And it'll probably end up being business for the COP in the next couple of years. I'm kind of grateful there's not broad agreement on this right now, because there's a lot of hair on this that needs to be sorted.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much. I actually, this is the time that we're at, where I'm obligated to stop asking questions myself and to turn it to the audience. And so I actually do want to take time from the audience, because this is a very hot topic. It's very new. It's difficult to navigate, and there's a lot of obviously very smart people leading the way, showing innovation, but doing it as it's being designed. And I think that's also really important, is the people that are the leaders in this. This didn't exist when we started doing this. We are doing this together and working collaboratively together, even as competitors, even in the same market, to try and make systems that work. And I think that's really important. So I'm going to just get Justin from Emission Reductions Alberta to ask the first question.
Thanks very much. Thanks, great panel. Emissions Reduction Alberta, I've had the pleasure of investing in each of these three companies before us here. You represent sort of the creme de la creme of clean technology development in Canada right now. There's a lot of companies trying to scale in the clean tech sector, and it is a journey full of passion and perseverance that's required. I wondered if you could give us some inspiration to those out there trying to make a go of it in the scale-up and adoption side. What are some key takeaways you'd give to would-be innovators in this space?
This is not my first rodeo in starting up companies. I would summarize this thing by having a leadership that clearly can define the business model in which you want to play in that space. Because there's different kinds of business models. So defining this and sticking to your plan, and then getting the brain power to execute on that plan.
So it's interesting, because I define almost in terms of direct air capture, there's the pre-IRA and the post-IRA world. So pre-IRA, us starting in 2009, we were talking to people and they thought it was thermodynamically not appropriate and that we were science fiction. Fast forward now, Julio probably knows, but 60, 100 direct air capture companies. So what the U.S. has done in terms of innovation is what will drive the CDR industry forward. In terms of how we were supported by Canada. Canada did a great job of being able to help support us. The Canadian government gave us funding to be able to do our innovation center, even though we're being acquired, which is a great signal to the world that our technology is commercially deployable. The technology development will continue to happen in Canada, and things like the tax treatment in Canada for innovation will continue to help Canadian companies, which is why we're also seeing our DAC, we call them competitors, but we need all of them, to coming into Canada and setting up offices and taking advantage of I'd say the hard work that we've done over the past 14 years to get all of the treatment that will help direct air capture scale in Canada.
So if I were to give advice to another entrepreneurs coming into the space, is certainly study the carbon markets and build that into your plan. But probably more importantly, I would say, once you do that, make sure you focus on quality. Do not cut any corners, and because it'll well, one, it could be very harmful to your brand if you do it the wrong way. And that's very hard to recover from. But the market, as Julio will continue to tell us, is as you mentioned, is moving upwards to high quality. It's a flight to quality. That's where you want to play, and you have to do the hard work around MRV, and you got to figure that out so that you can really stand behind the numbers, and you'll always be served well with that.
Final thought exactly along those lines, and a brief one. If you do not have measurement, monitoring, verification, and reporting, MMRV, you have no product. Period. If you can't do that, you're selling hype and people smell it. Don't be one of those people. Be technically deep, be thermodynamically smart, care about costs, work hard, but don't ever try to push moxie alone. You really have to deliver the goods in terms of MRV.
Sorry, I'm going to have to excuse myself in a few minutes, so... No, I don't have anything to say, but I just want to mention I don't want to be rude and run out of the door.
Thank you for being here. Do I have any? That was a fantastic question, and there is actually a pause, and that's what they call it, breakthrough as well, and trying to get those things to the next step. It's often hard. So great question, Justin, and kudos to all of you and your work, Julio, in getting that to happen. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, please.
You talked a fair bit about quality in voluntary markets. Can you define that a little bit more and maybe talk about some of the additionality requirements, such as financial additionality, and give some thoughts? Is that all that helpful in making sure the markets are stable and have the quality that you're looking for?
Yes. Yeah. No. Thank you, Rob. Every year we publish our criteria for high quality CO2 removal. This is the third version of the publication. We released it in June. Go to our website. It's very clear. Every vertical, it doesn't matter whether it's mineralization or BECCS or forests or direct air capture, we say clearly thou must and thou shalt. You must do these things if you want to be high quality. You should do these things if you want to be high quality or higher quality on top of that. They're very straightforward. Additionality is central to that. And in point of fact, financial additionality is also a component of that. A good example of this is the recent deal between Microsoft and Ørsted. Microsoft put a bid package in place. That money was absolutely essential to get it up and running. It was also not enough to pay for everything. The Danish government put a chunk of money on the table as well. Only those two pieces of money allowed it to get into the market, so it's clearly financially additional. If just the Danish government were putting the money together, there would be zero project. Like that, it's pretty easy to do that with these sorts of things. And if you're doing an ethanol plant in the United States and you're trying to get $85 a ton, it's harder to make the case for financial additionality in that sort of circumstance. But if you're actually doing a pulp and paper mill, like Claude was talking about, 100%. Like, you need that money, and you're still going to need a carbon credit on top of it, or else the projects aren't real. And it's not just 1 year. You're going to need multi-year offtakes. All of these projects are now taking 5, 8, 10-year contracts because these companies need to go to a bank. And if they've got a 1-year contract, the bank's not going to finance them. So the financial additionality, everyone's sharpened their pencils, and they're getting smarter about what exactly that means.
So financial additionality is an interesting one that we've had a lot of deep thoughts about at Carbon Engineering. So one, I consider direct air capture to be additional by nature, and the only way that direct air capture is not additional is if it's required from a regulatory perspective. If it comes to the subsidies that might happen, they should be declared in any system. This is the subsidies that you've got, and then to me, at some point, it becomes a commercial deal. Do I want to pay this for what's been subsidized? But it's additional by nature because the only reason you're doing direct air capture is for climate benefit. If you're doing a utilization, there's a different challenge. But if you're doing direct air capture to sequestration, the only reason you're doing that is for the climate benefit. The other challenge with some of the earlier models that we saw, which were financial additionality, was if you limit your IRR, you're going to limit how much you can write.
No, it's a great as well. I think one of the things we did not talk about today, and we did a little bit about permanence and ensuring monitoring and verification, et cetera. I think for our next roadshow topic, we might want to link that into the opportunities for the sequestration and where these facilities are of value and where we can target markets to try and make these projects viable. We can't all put it in cement in Africa, which is a fantastic opportunity, but where some of these direct air capture projects are happening, where some of the capture projects are happening, where investors are investing in the projects. So with that, that's actually my tee up for our second panel that will happen in the future. But for now, this is the end, unless, Kevin, you have a burning question. So with that, thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Big funds, big tech, carbon management revolution.